Glad you're able to be with us again this morning. Thankful to see all of you, most of you, and it's a pleasure to worship together. I want to invite you to open up to 1 Kings chapter 17. 1 Kings chapter 17 and 1 Kings chapter 16. This is where we're going to be spending, and 1 Kings chapter 19. And we'll look at 18, so it's going to be a long one. So get settled in. Hopefully, for your sakes, it won't be too long. This month, what we're looking at, if you remember, we're looking at dealing with adversity, overcoming adversity. This year and this month, we're looking at different leaders that posed adverse situations to the followers of God. And we're introduced in 1 Kings chapter 16 to a man named Ahab. Ahab was a wicked king with a wicked wife. And we'll look at that this morning. But we're looking first of all at the wickedness of Ahab, and then we're going to look at the righteousness, eventually, the righteousness of a man named Elijah. So we're looking at how Elijah dealt with the wickedness of Ahab. But in chapter 16, we're introduced to Ahab, and let's take a look at what made him so wicked. What made him such a bad dude? Read with me, and we're going to begin reading here in 1 Kings chapter 16, and we're going to look at verse 29 and verse 30. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri began to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. As if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. In his days, Hiel, let's stop there. Talk about rebuilding Jericho. Hiel did, which is more or less irrelevant to our story. But we hear about Ahab and his wickedness. And we see in verse 31, one thing that made him so wicked is because he followed the sins of Jeroboam. Now, if you remember, if you go back in your Israeli history, the divided kingdom happened right after Solomon. And the divided kingdom, Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel. And what he did, because Jerusalem was in the southern part, so he couldn't go to Jerusalem. So what he decided to do is in the southern part of his kingdom in Bethel and in the northern part of his kingdom in Dan, what he decided to do was set up two idols. And guess what? They look like cows, okay? So he set up these golden calves in the northern part and in the southern part of the kingdom. And he said this, "Behold your God who delivered you from Egypt." You talk about some gumption. Behold your God who delivered you from Egypt. Now, it's kind of interesting because when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, you remember these people that he had left, they created this golden image, I guess, under the direction of Aaron. And you remember what that looked like? A calf. And then Moses beat that into a dust, and he made the Israelites drink it. And God was so angry. So here is Jeroboam, and he is setting up this altar in the northern part and the southern part, and he's saying, "Behold your God." Idolatry. So one lesson I suppose we could take from that is it matters who your role model is. It matters who you look up to. Your role model in the eyes of God, it matters. The person that you are focused on, make sure that they have godly lives. If you're looking up to these superstars, if you're looking up to someone who is an immoral person, if you're looking up to someone who doesn't have the relationship with God in the right place, hey, pay careful attention. You may end up like Ahab. Be careful. It matters who your role model is. If you continue reading, another thing that made Ahab so wicked is Jezebel. Now, if you're picking out names for your little girl, I would advise against Jezebel. Not only does it not have a very good ring to it, she was a wicked, wicked woman. Look at this and read with me in verse 31. Picking up there, after the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshiped him. Now, it's interesting because it goes ahead and it mentions that Jezebel was the son, Baal was the daughter of Ethbaal, okay? Obviously, there was this connection in the family to worshiping Baal. Obviously, Ethbaal, Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshiped him. It matters who you marry. Young folks, those of you who aren't married, it matters who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Let me tell you, if you don't have a foundation of Jesus in your relationship, you're going to struggle. Marry someone who wants to serve God and wants to see you get to heaven. Jezebel, she didn't serve God, and she probably didn't care too much about Ahab getting to heaven either. Another thing that we see here that provoked the Lord to anger and made him angry, not only did he marry Jezebel, and not only did he continue in the sins of Jeroboam, we see in verse 32, he took it a step further. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Ahab made not just Baal, but he also made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord of God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Not only did he worship the idols, he continued to build the idols. He built Baal. Still fascinating. How could you build a god? But he built an idol to Baal. He built him a house, it seems like, and he also built an Asherah. Now, the Asherah was the wife of Baal in their minds. So not only did he make an idol to Baal, but he made sure that Baal was happy, I suppose, with his wife, the Asherah. Fascinating, isn't it? Baal was, and it kind of makes sense because Baal was the god of the harvest. He was the god of the rain, of the thunder, and all the things that were associated with giving and providing the people with the food that they ate. So that's what Baal was good. That's what he was good for in their minds. So he built these altars. It matters who you marry, it matters who your role model is, and it matters what you do. God cares about what you do. because you can provoke the Lord to anger or you can make the Lord happy. So the conclusion, as we've already read, the conclusion there in verse 33 is that he did more to provoke the Lord, to the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. He made God angry. It matters to God. Ahab was a wicked man doing wicked things, serving everything but God. Let's look at the righteousness of Elijah, because you might be faced in your life with a situation and you're looking at someone leading you who is similar and doing things that are similar to what Ahab was doing, serving things other than God, looking in places other than where God would have you to look, and living an unrighteous life. So how do you respond when you're facing someone like that, when you are in that situation? Let's look at what Elijah did. The first thing that we see is after we're introduced to Ahab, and we look at 1 Kings chapter 17 and verse 1, Elijah prayed to God. He prayed to God. Let's read this. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." He prayed to God. Now again, it's interesting. He says, the God of Israel, the Lord, there shall be neither rain nor dew. Now, listen to me. I don't know how you control, first of all, the rain, unless you're God. But the dew, I mean, okay. But we get that he prayed to God. If we look at James chapter 3, or James chapter 5 rather, and very quickly turn over there and read this. He gives us this example in James chapter 5 and verse 17. Elijah was a man with nature like ours, and he prayed fervently that it might not rain. And look at this, for 3 years and 6 months, it did not rain on the earth. Whoa, buddy. You talk about the power of prayer. The first step that Elijah took in facing an adverse leader is he took it to God. I'm going to pray to God. So for 3 years and 6 months, it did not rain. Now remember, Baal, the god of the rain, the God of thunder, the God of harvest, the God of provision, for 3 years and 6 months, Baal was dead. Proof. The God of Israel, the Lord, he is God. He prayed to God. He trusted in God. So here you are, 3 years and 6 months, and there is no rain. And guess what happens when there is no rain? Things start to get a little sparse. Right? I mean, you're looking around for anything and for everything. But Elijah, trusted in God. I mean, I don't know if I would last for 3 years and 6 months without rain. I mean, I barely last 4 weeks, and I'm like, we about time to get some rain around here. The ground's starting to crack. 3 years and 6 months with no rain, but he continued to trust in God. God said, depart, and in verse 3 of chapter 17, he says, depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Kerioth, which is east of Jordan. You shall drink from the brook, and I will command the ravens to feed you there. All right. Now, I don't know how much you know about the ecosystem, but you know what ravens eat? They don't go and get a filet mignon for you. They're bringing whatever is dead that they can find. They are essentially junkyard dogs of the sky. But God says, hey, I'm going to command the ravens and they're going to bring you food and you're going to drink from this brook. Okay. He trusted in God. Eventually, the brook dried up. I mean, you can imagine there were 3 years and 6 months with no rain. So eventually the brook dried up and he continued to trust in God. God told him to go to the land of Zarephath. In verse 9, he says, arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So he goes to this widow, and the widow says, I've just got a little bit of flour, and I'm going to make me one last cake, one last piece of bread, and me and my son, we're going to eat it, and we're going to die. That was her conclusion. But Elijah said, you're not going to run out. Just make some for me first. He continued to trust in God. Time after time, desperate situation after desperate situation, he continued to trust in God. When you're facing adversity, when you're facing difficult situations, step one, trust in God. Pray to God. And the next thing that he did is he fled to God. He ran away to God. And before we get to that, let me set up the context for you. So we are in chapter 17, and Elijah, he is saying to Ahab, hey, no rain until I say so, okay? We're going to prove that God is God. No rain until I say so. Then he goes, and 3 years and 6 months, he's by the brook, he's with this widow, and then finally he calls out Baal. He calls out Ahab, and he says, bring out the prophets of Baal, and finally we are going to prove who is God. And you remember the story. They build an altar, the prophets of Baal, they build an altar. Elijah builds an altar. They put the sacrifice on the altar. They dance around the altar. And Elijah, he's making fun of them the whole time. He's like, yell louder. Maybe he's asleep. Because he knows he's no God. Maybe he's going to the bathroom, relieving himself. Yell louder. So they're dancing around this idol. They're cutting themselves. And Elijah's just over here. He knows who God is. So Elijah, it's his turn. He dumps water over the altar, over the sacrifice, so that the trench that he just dug is full of water. Lots and lots of water. Now remember, Baal, the god of thunder, the God of rain, the God of the harvest. Elijah calls out to God, fire coming down from heaven, whatever that could be. In my mind, I'm thinking lightning, or you see this cloud, the thunder. Fire comes down from heaven, consumes not just the sacrifice, but it consumes the water. Maybe symbolic of Baal, consumes everything that was there. So after that scene, after all of that, Elijah goes to Ahab and he's like, I hear thunder now. Now that we have proved who God is, I hear thunder. So he goes out to Mount Carmel and he prays, and he sends his servant out 7 times. And finally on the 7th time, he sees a cloud coming, and it's like the hand of God. So here comes this cloud and the rain. And what does Jezebel do? I'm going to kill you. Jezebel seeks Elijah's life. So we arrive in chapter 19 in this, with all that having gone on. In chapter 19, Elijah is running for his life from Jezebel, a wicked, wicked woman. And he is running, and he goes to the Mount of God in Horeb, Mount Sinai, we know it by. So he arrives at Mount Sinai, and God calls out to him, Elijah, what are you doing? And his response is this. In 1 Kings chapter 19, he says, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. You can imagine. So when you're facing adversity, give it to God. Run to God. Tell God what is on your heart. Tell God what is on your mind. Pray to God. Run to God. Well, the story continues to unfold. The fire comes, the earthquake comes, the strong wind comes, and then the low whisper. God wasn't in any of those in the low whisper. Then God calls out to Elijah again, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah says again, I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only am left. And they seek my life to take it away. And this is God's response, okay? If I could summarize it for you, this is God's response. There's work to be done. Verse 15 and verse 16. Go and anoint a new king in Syria. Go and anoint a new king in Israel. And go and anoint Elisha, your replacement. Get up and work. There's work to be done. Verse 17. I'm in control. The king of Syria is going to be my avenger. The king of Israel is going to be my avenger. And then Elisha is going to be my avenger with the sword. I'm in control. Get up. Get to work. I'm in control. And verse 18, you're not alone. Sometimes you may feel as if you're all alone, but he says in verse 18, he says, yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed down to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. You're not alone. I mean, when you're facing adversity, when you're going through difficult situations, when life seems to be completely against you, get to work. I mean, the fields are white for the harvest. Get up and get to work. Remember, God is in control. When you're facing adversity, stop being selfish. Stop thinking about yourself. Had a great aunt that died of a disease that crippled her. She lived longer than the doctors expected. My mom has multiple sclerosis. By now, the doctors predicted that she'd be in a wheelchair. She won't slow down. She was talking to my aunt one day, and she said, how are you so healthy? She says, I don't think about it. I don't think about myself. You want a healthy life? Stop being selfish. You want a righteous life? Stop being selfish. Why would you think about yourself? Remember, you're not alone. God is in control and there is work to be done. Get over yourself. Get to work. When you're facing adversity, just like Elijah, pray to God. I mean, step one, bring it to God. Step two, trust that God is in complete control of the situation. And then run to him as if your life depended on it. Because quite frankly, it does. If you are not living that out, if your life, maybe you're facing adversity, maybe you're in a bad situation, here you go. Just like Elijah, give it over to God. And if you need to give your life over to God, now is the time to do that as we stand and sing.